welcome to our first episode of Agati Video Podcast. This is a new space where we host conversations with designers, architects, and industry thought leaders. I'm your host, Joe Agati, and I'm the CEO and Director of Design here at Agati Furniture. For our first episode today, we have Margaret Sullivan, founder of Margaret Sullivan Studios, a full-service design firm specializing in cultural and civic institutions with an emphasis on 21st century libraries. How are you doing today, Margaret?
Good. I'm excited to be your first guest. We've known each other for a long time.
This is exciting. Where are you calling us from?
I am currently in Greenville, South Carolina. My firm is based in New York City, but I have relocated during COVID to Greenville where my kids are. They're 14 and 18. Oh. So I'm helping out with the complex parenting that COVID has provided for all of us. But it's good.
Yeah, it's a different journey with the COVID, and especially on the parenting side. I'm going through the same thing myself with my two kids. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your firm?
Okay, so I started years ago, which is how I know Agati, with Hardy Holzman Pfeiffer, a major cultural civic institutional firm that for probably the 1980s and 1990s was designing almost every public library institution in the country. And so I started working there in 1999. And within 6 months, Malcolm Holzman, the partner, came over to my desk and took me to lunch at a Thai restaurant around the corner, I can remember it, 28th Street. And he said, he asked me, would you want to be the next library expert in our office? And I said, well, of course you say yes. I was 29 years old. I said yes, but the thing was about Hardy Holzman Pfeiffer was that we also designed theaters and parks and student centers. And I said, as long as I don't get to not do the work that, where I can learn from y'all. And so that was the beginning. And I think within, 2 weeks, I had booked a plane ticket to San Diego. That was my first ALA midwinter. And I went with Daria Pizzetta, who I'm sure you know, who was one of my mentors at Hardy Holzman Pfeiffer. And she said, well, the first night we go out to dinner with Joe Agati.
Senior, not me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that started my immersion into library land and I think the synergistic collaborative relationship among what many people call us as vendors, but how integrally related we are as collaborators.
Yeah. So when Malcolm approached you, so what made you, say yes to being you said library expert?
I think the reason that I said yes then, and what has continued to be the values-driven, mission-driven work that we do, is that I believe so strongly that education is a vehicle to opportunity. And I think, I had a decent relationship with my library growing up. And I think I'm a maker learner, and you probably are too. I mean, we make, we build. And I think part of the motivation for me getting into this profession as a career choice is to bring in all of the aspects of learning to communities and to create inclusive and equitable learning environments for all. And so that's, I think, what was interesting to me when Malcolm approached me. But then as I've evolved our work and it's become we've used the human-centered, community-driven design approach, just realizing that it's way more complicated than just being a learning institution, that it needs to serve social connections, to build trust and cooperation, to be reflective of culture. We're just in such a significant systemic shift in all aspects of our culture. But I think for those of us who've been in the library land, we're so much more aware of what COVID has surfaced because these have been, we've been boots on the ground for the past 10, 15 years at surfacing and working through public spaces to support complexities.
Yeah. Before this call, we were going through your website, and you have some interesting kind of questions that the website starts off with. Can you tell me a little bit more about those? What's going on there? Why you picked those questions? What's behind that?
One of our clients, Melanie Huggins, who's at Richland Library, she posed a question when we started doing work with her 7 years ago. And she said to us, how will we design to support the activities and programs that will foster the feelings and outcomes that we want for our communities? Like, I can do activities and programs. I can design for these, project-based learning. I think I can. But how do you design for feelings and outcomes?
Sure.
So, that's an evocative question. But I think, it works at every scale. It works at a master facility scale. It works at when you're designing a piece of furniture, as you know. So that evocative, emotional connection that you make with a product, with a person, with an experience, that builds the brand loyalty. If you're a library, it's potentially a brand. If you're an architect providing a service, it's how you engage with your clients that make them connect them to you. And that's true in your work as well. So I thought that was a really interesting question. And so as we have evolved our practice, the framing of that question, how will we create the conditions for communities to flourish? So that's kind of the big umbrella. And then within that, how do you foster, what are the local needs? So how do you foster inclusive learning environments? And every community is different in where they put their priorities. So it's a good way to frame, how do you create the conditions for folks who love, a bookstore vibe to feel like they're in the best bookstore in town.
So how do you go about doing that with clients? You're talking about fostering, that bookstore vibe, and for that, and I'm assuming is that obviously it's a different approach for kind of each institution based on each kind of cultural makeup of the area.
I mean, it's an evidence-based approach, and so it really is immersing ourselves in those communities that we're working with, and there are two avenues on the front end. So the first would be, we lead from the front. Like, as a leader in your community, you are both privileged and burdened. And so as a library institution, you're another form of leadership. So I really, I like to encourage, lead from the front, lead with your vision. You are in these positions of leadership because you have a vision that is inspirational. So I like to start there and even push envelopes if I think there's opportunity for their strategic work to evolve into loftier and bold ambitions. And then the second is rooting that ambition in evidence-based community need and community aspiration, and increasingly focusing less on needs and challenges. Because, obviously, unless we're at 100% equity, unless we're at 100% inclusivity, unless we're at 100% economic stability, we still have work to do. So it's just a measure of where are you in that.
Sure.
And that's prioritization and collaboration and where you put your resources. But if we're designing for utopia, which I think, that's okay to set out as an aspiration, then increasingly we're learning that it's better to focus on community strengths and individuals' assets, and looking at all of us as individuals who have aspirations to do, feel, be, without the focus necessarily on what are the gaps for that individual to achieve that. And I think that's where the library has its real privilege, is that it can really focus on providing opportunities for our community members based on that. Often when you go to ALA and all these, famous celebrities come and speak, you'll have somebody like Natalie Merchant spoke, and she was like, I went to the library and checked out all of this great music.
Yeah.
And my neighbor wrote a book, Brian Stokes Mitchell, in New York City, And he went to an ALA to promote his book one time. And of course, fortunately I was there and I went and saw him. And he's a Broadway star performer. And he said, I went to the library and checked out all of the Broadway musical albums. And so, you make that connection between how critical that library is. And so when you are able to have the opportunity to focus on the individuals and we do a significant amount of community engagement, both at what we call the grass tops level and at the grassroots level, to glean. Librarians know their communities better than anybody. So we pull a lot of information out of them.
It seems like a lot of people that aren't really in the library world don't maybe understand or maybe even sometimes take for granted like the integral kind of like community hub that the library plays. Is what I've noticed with, obviously I work in the library and I've worked in libraries for quite some time. And as I discussed with my wife, she spends a lot of time at the library. The kids love going there and other friends, they go to the library. But it seems like when a library is doing its job at the best, like it's almost like kind of taken for granted, like how integral it is to that center part of that community. And it seems like your design and whole process of top down is really kind of building and trying to build that emotional connection kind of through there. Is that accurate?
Totally. Because it's an experience, ultimately it's a radical instrument of an experience. And I think it's an interesting profession to be in because on the one hand, I feel like if we were to go in and just start from scratch without any mental model of a public library, it would be very interesting to see how quickly it would evolve into what form it needs to be for the local community. So I do have a radical kind of vision that we have created this instrument or this idea as the public. I mean, the Constitution doesn't tell us we need a library. I mean, the Constitution doesn't even tell us we need schools. These are all things that we as a society have decided we want. And I think remembering that daily in the world of designing public experiences is a real challenging one, but it's also enables a forced innovation almost every day. But then on the other hand, as you know, I mean, we have had formulas and benchmarks, and they produce things like you need to have this many reader seats in your library. You need to have this many reader tables, and you need to have, and you and I have designed businesses around a model, and as we not only are trying to inspire a whole industry to think outside of the box, it puts a significant amount of pressure on us to also think outside of the box for our own systems. And I think because of that, we've designed these new methodologies that are rooted in human-centered design because that's interesting, it's exciting, it gives us the evidence to make the changes we need to make in our business model. I mean, it trickles down into even our business models to be able to support. Ultimately, I think, I always say our client is the institution, but the client really is the community.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's what's just so much fun about working in the world of libraries is because our client that's paying the bills appreciates us being able to frame decision-making on that community.
That makes sense.
And appreciates, as I'm sure they do with you, that we as a business model will adapt to those needs. Yeah,
it's adapting, and I feel like like you were saying earlier, it's a lot of kind of pushing the boundaries and questioning quite a bit. When I talk with people, and I kind of I get a lot of questions like, well, how do you suggest we do our research, or how do you? And I'm a big advocate of observation. And I'm very frank with you. I think surveys and things have their place, but what the survey doesn't allow you to is really question. And I tell people, you got to keep asking the same question like 7 times and really get to the root of what's going on with people. It's not until you ask why 5, 6, 7, 8 times, whatever that.
You have to ask why 5 times.
Yeah. Yeah. You're never gonna really understand. So tell me about one of your kind of like, if you think back in the last few years, tell me about like one of your favorite projects or a project that really stuck with you.
Oh, Oh, that's an unfair question. What's
I
your
know,
favorite
it's tough.
child? It's interesting. I really do see our work meaning the work I've been a part of over the past 5 years, not even as the firm Margaret Sullivan Studio, as a continuum of evolving the industry at a thought leader level based on place, problem, project. That's an interesting lens in which I can see our work, but it's the privilege of being rooted in just this niche. But I think, the work, I'm going to just talk about scale. I mean, some of the projects that I'm most proud of have different scales or different budgets or different goals. But I think as a whole, it would be like, where have we made the most impact or transformation for the communities? Yeah. So I'm going to start with one that just is dawning on me that I'm really proud of, which is we do pro bono work in the Bronx. And so we designed a library for a school in the South Bronx. And this library has to be everything for these students. It's their lunch place, it's their play space, it's their library space. It was like 5,000 square feet and they had a budget of $5,000. So, it's just like totally absurd, right? Yeah. But we were able to totally give those youth the same environment that we would have been that we've given communities that have robust budgets. And they have a space for imaginative play. They have a space for, Lego and STEM and STEAM building. They have a place for chess. They have a space for story time. They have a space where we got clipboards and they could put stories that they'd written. Oh, wow. So, I hate to say this, but we did have to go to IKEA. And we also were able to up the budget to $15,000. So I guess the fun thing about that story is that if you start with an approach to learning that is curriculum based, around like you need to dance, you need to sing, you need to play, all of the things that we know are best practices for early literacy development in particular. You can, they're going to have to replace that furniture in 2 seconds flat, but it gave those kids like something amazing. And we did murals on the wall that community members painted. So it became like a total community project. Yeah. In the long run, those kind of projects, I think, have lasting meaning that goes, beyond something that's more conventional. To counter that with scale, I think the collaborations that we've had with library systems like Richland Library in South Carolina, like Prince George's County with Roberta Phillips, like Salt Lake City with Peter Bromberg and Debbie Ehrman. And, in particular, we've been working with Las Vegas Clark County District for the past 7 years, where we've had the opportunity to do strategic work. We've gotten to know the staff very well. I love like just being at ALA and just seeing them in the hall and just having, how's your family? Yeah. But then also being able to do architectural projects with architects, a variety of architects all over the country that are all wonderful to work with. And then being able to, as a designer, just seeing your own design come to life. Yeah. There's just nothing better. And that's not the end all for us. Our end all has the community been transformed. But to know that we've been given the opportunity and the confidence with clients to, design some of the just wackiest. Jacksonville, Florida, we're about to have under construction their 2 youth services areas. And I swear to you, my staff came up with the most innovative, wackiest, outside of the box designs. And it's like, that's just great. I get to give these young people this opportunity. I mean, how great is that I'm able to empower these young people to bring their best ideas, and there's nothing better. So
I want to shift gears for a second, because you mentioned this a few times, human-centered design. So what does that mean? Why does that matter?
It's just it's a fancy word for saying put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And we put ourselves in other people's shoes through any variety of lenses. So it could be a hypothetical narrative where you're just, and often we do this with our clients right off the bat, just to give them the muscles to learn this way of thinking. But my day as a working mom to two teenage boys is a very different day than even my 18-year-old and my 14-year-old. So it's just really knowing that we are designing for complex human conditions. And if we think, even if we think of ourselves as becoming that 18-year-old boy instead of the 40-something-year-old mom, like that gives us a new way of empathy and compassion. And empathy and compassion is the practice. That's the basis of that practice. And then we have tools where we teach folks how to do one-on-one, hour-and-a-half long interviews that then are more authentic and genuine about gleaning what are the hopes, dreams, aspirations, what are the challenges to fulfilling your goals, and how can the blank institution be in support of that? How are we in support? How are we not in support? And then that gives you the evidence to start thinking about things in an innovative way. And, as we evolve what we have to provide as a service or a product, we need to know why. And then we need to understand a little bit more about the what to inform what we need to do to meet those needs. So that it's a process that enables that. And I've learned it through a colleague of mine named Patrick Bottlebaum, who I started working with at the Richland Library when we were doing some master facilities work. And he was working with them to do what's called service design. We've worked together on tons of projects through the years, and he's got 20 different tools that help us evolve, learning more specifically and deeply about what individuals need. But what you find is at first it feels like, oh my gosh, it's going to be so overwhelming and everybody's going to need something different. What you find when you do this work is that they're general patterns of human behavior. We all need intimacy. We all need love. We all need something that makes us curious. And so those are the building blocks. So that's what we found. But design thinking is another. And I'm sure you engage in design thinking process. Yeah,
our big philosophy here with our approach to product design is kind of like you said, there's just fundamental behavioral conditions that just are ingrained in us just from an evolutionary standpoint. And so when you know and understand that, it's really kind of designing around that. And while you're doing it at a much more macro scale than we are from a product standpoint, but even down to the micro scale of the product standpoint, you know that people want to have a certain level of feeling of comfort and security. And, the space obviously is a huge portion of that. But then, from our perspective, it's how do we bring that even to like the individual kind of product level, and what can we do with those products to try to help emphasize that, especially with everything going on, in light of a worldwide pandemic, I feel like that is kind of, probably an even greater emphasis of how do you make people feel comfortable in an environment, for sure.
I wanted to ask you this question. Do you feel like you're constantly in search of designing the perfect chair?
Yes. Well, it's probably in constant. I think I don't know if there's a such thing as perfect, but as I tell my wife, it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. And so luckily my wife is a very patient woman with me. Because it's constant, what I would call innovating, she calls nitpicking. Design is never done. It's the education process that you're on where you're going to always, every time you do something, you're going to learn. And from that learning, which makes, I think, a good problem solver, designer, whatever that is, you're going to then understand a little bit more and then make that next step better and then make that next step better. So designing's never done. As I'm sure you're done. I'm sure every time you finish a project, you're like, oh, there's 30 things I would have totally done different now that it's all done. Yeah.
Well, the other term I've learned in service design and design thinking is the answer. It depends. Like that's the answer.
Yes.
and you and I both know this, but there's always like, oh, we need to get a chair that does X, Y, and Z. And they're like, well, it depends.
Yeah, exactly. It depends. I like that. We're coming to the end here. I just wanted to close out our conversation. It's been a challenging year, obviously the last year with everything going on. So I was just wondering if you had any words of encouragement you wanted to give our folks in the library world.
Oh, I think it's the best time to be in the library world. I don't think we could be at a better time to position what our strength is in library land, which is we are a values-driven profession. And there is no other industry, even, in the nonprofit, cultural, public, let alone, kind of corporate or for-profit world that lives and breathes a commitment to community transformation, like libraries. I think the other thing is, we have a sensibility when we're in the public sector that we're under-resourced. But if you look at the way the world is, I mean, certainly for-profits are, revenue for the most part, unless you're an Amazon or a box that gets put to somebody's front door. Revenues are down significantly.
Yeah.
Nonprofits are struggling. I mean, I have many library clients who don't even have their nonprofit partners in existence anymore. Small businesses like mine, our revenue is significantly down. So there is a stability, I think, that we are depending on public libraries that they have at this moment. That combined with skill set, know-how to be community centric, to respond quickly to what the communities need.
Yeah.
As well as just that commitment to improving the quality of life. I mean, it's high demand. It is a high demand time, and
yes,
a place where we're at a time where we can shine. And we're even doing some work right now where we're doing outdoor placemaking master facilities plan for the state of Delaware, because it's a near-term opportunity, but it'll be great that we start activating our public spaces because like there's no better way to demonstrate and add vibrancy. So I just think it's a fabulous time. I think, it's hard to see tomorrow, but we're going to need these experiences that public libraries provide. We're going to need the healing. We're going to need the compassion, and we're going to need places to come together and build trust and cooperation. And I was actually just in Nashville a few weeks ago went to the National Museum of African American Music, and it was so experience-based that I was like, we are going to need these experiences and they are going to get us out of this depression that I think is just inherent to being separated. And, we're going to get there. I'm confident we're going to get there. So I think it's the best time to be in this industry.
Yes, it will get better. So I've told people I can't put a date on it, and I don't want to put on a date on it, but I know it will. And when it comes, it's going to be so much better.
Well, they've told us it will. They just keep telling us it might take a little bit more time.
Exactly. Well, Margaret, I wanted to thank you for your time today. This was so wonderful.
Oh, thank you. It was fun.
And then I just want to thank everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.